Thank you for joining us for this session of the K-12 Blackboard Innovative Teaching Series. This series is designed to help K-12 educators reimagine education with Blackboard's teaching and learning solutions. The K-12 Blackboard Innovative Teaching Series harnesses the power of our K-12 community of academic leaders, teachers, and other experts to provide relevant, real-time, on-demand, and ongoing professional development opportunities for K-12 educators. My name is Katie Gallagher, and I'm the
Welcome to the Blackboard.
As well as Melissa Mayer, our product marketing intern for the K-12 team. Did we lose audio for a minute there?
Just for a second, Katie, but I think you're in business again.
Okay, not sure. Did you catch, oh sorry, we are on, it looks like we're on the wrong slide here. Did you catch any part of this slide here?
I think your verbal was good, so I think you're able to catch up now.
Okay, so my name is Katie Gallagher. I'm the Director of Solutions Marketing for Teaching and Learning K-12. I'll be serving as the moderator for the K-12 Blackboard Innovative Teaching Series. I wanted to thank Jenny Breister from the K-12 Field Marketing Team and Melissa Maris, our K-12 Product Marketing Intern, who are joining us and helping to answer questions in the chat today. We'll be joining you for the series this spring. We're always open to new ideas for topics for the series, so let us know if you have an interest in presenting for a future session or you have a topic you'd like to see. You can always email me at katie.gallagher@blackboard.com. Each session in the series will be recorded. You can search for the K-12 Blackboard Innovative Teaching Series playlist on our Blackboard TV YouTube channel or go to tinyurl.com/bitsk12. You'll be receiving the recording and the presentation slides in a few days after each webinar by email. You'll also receive an invitation to participate in an online professional learning community that's designed to augment the series and create an avenue for ongoing collaboration and dialogue. So please accept this invitation and participate in the new online PLC. So as you can see here, we have a lot of exciting sessions lined up for professional development this spring. Please join us again next Monday at 3:30 Eastern Standard Time for Meeting the Needs of All Learners Through Individualized Instruction with both Carrie Jones and Tishawn Nye from Metro Nashville Public Schools. You can go to bbbb.blackboard.com/K12bits to register for any or all sessions within the series. If you haven't done so already, be sure to download the Blackboard K-12 Live app. Every session in the series is added to this app, and it provides ongoing, on-demand, free professional development for you, as well as the best sessions from BB World last summer. So be sure to download it if you haven't done so already. Today, we're very pleased to welcome Matthew Kruger-Ross, who will take us through Meeting the Needs of All Learners Through Individualized Learning. This presentation will explore how the affordances made available by a learning management system can help meet the needs of all learners by individualizing learning. Individualization refers to instruction that is paced and adjusted to the learning needs of different learners. A teacher who individualizes instruction selects technology and responses to support the learning needs of the individual learner and monitors learning to decide next steps and integrates an assessment of learning. Yet most LMSs are not utilized to their full potential, and participants in the session will learn about how instruction can be individualized through adaptive and conditional release. Matthew is the STEM Professional Learning Coordinator for the North Carolina Virtual Public Schools. He's also a doctoral candidate in philosophy and education at Simon Fraser University in Burnaby, British Columbia, Canada. After completing his BS in middle grade education from NC State University in May 2005, Matthew stepped into the classroom at Carolyn and Friends School, an independent Quaker school in Durham, North Carolina. He taught math, music, and technology in the middle school. After 4 wonderful years, he chose to leave CFS and pursue advanced degrees in educational technology, philosophy, and critical studies. In May 2012, Matthew completed his Master of Science in Instructional Technology at NC State University in Raleigh. His research interests include philosophy of education, philosophy of technology, transformative learning, and critical studies. So we're very pleased to have Matthew today and can't wait to hear from him. I do want to backtrack 2 slides really quickly and cover some housekeeping before I hand it over. It looks like that I do need to update the title of the next session. So it's not the same title as today's session. Next Monday, this session is actually titled Virtual Peer Tutoring with Terry Jones and to Sean and I. So anyway, heads up there. We'll talk about that later. But before I hand it over to Matthew, if everyone could please, we want to encourage a lot of participation in the session. So number 1, don't hesitate to turn your talk button on to speak up and ask a question or add a comment. Throughout the session, though, if you are not intentionally speaking, if you could turn your talk button off so we can ensure a high-quality recording. And also, feel free to use the chat to type questions in. I'll be watching for questions in the chat as Jenny and Melissa will feed questions into Matthew as we go. So again, everyone, looking forward to an active session. Excited to hand it over to Matthew. And Matthew, not repeating your session on Monday, no worries. I'm sorry about the typo on my slide. So with that, I'll hand it to Matthew.
You never know. There may be such a high demand we have to do it again next Monday, but, you know, we can cross our fingers. Just want to make sure everybody can hear me okay. I think that's good. Yes, yes. Thank you. And just to get started, I'm touched and honored by all of the very nice things you said. I didn't realize you were going to have a read through of the past decade and a half of my life. That was fun. Today I want to talk about what we're doing at NCVPS, the North Carolina Virtual Public School, and Individualized Learning. But in particular, and just to get started, because I think it's interesting, I, along with my partner, move and live in many different locations. You heard that I'm doing my PhD up in British Columbia. I'm actually right now in Portland, Oregon, just for the long weekend, just to get away for a bit. It's about a 5-hour drive south of Vancouver. And yet I still do a lot of my work with NCVPS, which is located obviously in North Carolina on the East Coast. So what I would like to just know, and you can just do this in the chat just for my own interest, is where everybody is at right now. Where are you on the globe? Like I said, I just mentioned I'm right now in Portland, Oregon. Oh, okay, Orlando. I used to live in Orlando. Jacksonville, Florida, love it. Pennsylvania, love it. Texas, yay, Saskatchewan, wonderful. Oklahoma, Miami. Okay, wonderful. I just think it's fascinating, and it still blows my mind in Wisconsin. I love it. It still blows my mind in 2015, thank you, Ryan, Massachusetts, that we can, in 2015, all gather together in a space and be from literally all over this continent. I just love technology. I'll do my little dork out moment here. So thank you for that. I just wanted to see where everybody was at, and so you know a little bit more about where I'm from. So before I jump into the specifics of individualized learning, I have to give some context and some background. In particular, here's my general agenda. This is more for myself to keep me on track. Talk about NCVPS and the STEM blended program, a little bit more about who I am, although you probably know more than I do now. About professional learning at NCVPS, and finally, the primary topic for why we're here together is to talk about individualized learning. NCVPS is the virtual public school for the state of North Carolina and has been the only virtual solution for public schools in North Carolina for some time now. That's just recently changed. Legislation has opened the way for alternative virtual schools, but for quite a long time, the virtual public school in North Carolina was an arm of the Board of Education, administered by the Board of Education, and met the needs of all students across the state. Primarily in grades 9 to 12, We've kind of expanded a little bit into middle school, but primarily grades 9 to 12. As of this year, the 2014-2015 year, we're enrolled about 55,000 plus students, which is a fairly steady growth. I think at last count, this could be incorrect, but I think at last count we were the second largest, or maybe the third largest virtual public school behind Florida in the country. So that's just a little bit more about when I say NCVPS, I'm talking about the virtual public school. At NCVPS, we have our traditional online courses, what we would consider a traditional online course, where most of the content, if not all of the content, is located online through a learning management system. And we have an online teacher that is responsible for facilitating instruction. Students across North Carolina, and in cases outside of North Carolina, log on to the learning management system and are taught through what we would consider a traditional online course. But what I need to make a distinction, because we also have an alternative program that we call OCS and also our STEM blended programs. OCS stands for Occupational Course of Study, and sometimes it can also be referred to as like a credit recovery option. And in STEM, the usual acronym for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. Both the OCS and STEM programs are blended. And this is a little bit different than, well, not a little bit, it's actually quite a bit different than the traditional online format. It's a truly blended course where content is provided by NCVPS in one of our learning management systems, and we use at present Blackboard, Moodle, and SoftChalk for various reasons, legislative and financial. We are a bit spread in our 3 different learning management systems, but with our blended programs, we have content that lives in our learning management systems, and we have an NCVPS online teacher that is paired with a local face-to-face teacher, and they co-teach a course from anywhere from just a normal, what we would consider like a semester-long, like a fall or a spring term, and sometimes even year-long courses. And so this is where I come in with the STEM blended program. I think the Race to the Top, the RTTT grant program, phased out at the end of last year. It was done through the Department of Education, and one of the features that came out of the RTTT grant from the U.S. Department of Ed in North Carolina was trying to create a STEM blended program modeled after this OCS program. And like I just said, it's blended in that NCVPS designs the courses and provides the online teacher, and we also have the students located in a district with a face-to-face teacher, and the online teacher and the face-to-face teacher with their students collaborate and work together to meet the needs of the students and to teach the courses. So where this brings in for me is when this grant happened and when we started realizing that we needed a more robust professional learning opportunities for our teachers, I was brought on about 4 or 5 years ago at the beginning of the program to help develop and design professional learning for these STEM blended teachers. So that meant anything about teaching online to teaching in a blended environment to even, in some cases, the basics of using technology in classrooms, which is, as you noticed from when I was asking about where we all are, I'm located all over the country. And most of our districts are located in central or eastern North Carolina. So it involved using technology to truly be blended and come in and help do professional learning. So that's what I do for NCVPS. I'm doing a PhD. Those are my research interests. But that's not really what we're here to talk about today. Of course, I love talking about them, but not what we're here to talk about today. So how I fit into professional learning and how we get to individualized learning at NCVPS is with our 4 pillars. We went through a transformation about 3 years ago at NCVPS where we really decided to develop a more robust professional learning model. And this involved codifying a number of pillars. And originally there were 3 pillars. There were, as you can see here, there are the 4 listed, but there were 3, the communication, learning block, and grading and feedback. And it was a way for us to organize how we trained our online teachers to be successful at teaching online and not just teaching their content. We came to realize, however, over the past, I would say, year, and it came also out of watching and learning from our OCS and STEM blended programs, the need for a fourth pillar, and that is individualized learning. And so part of my work in the past year and a half has been really fleshing out and developing what individualized learning means for us as NCVPS online teachers, and developing a course and learning experiences to help train our teachers to integrate individualized learning into the other three pillars, the communication, teaching through the learning block or the announcements, and using grading and feedback, and how to individualize their instruction. And in some cases they were already doing so, but in this instance we were really trying to focus and highlight what it means to individualize and how we can use the technologies that we have to meet the needs of our students. Now, part of my work when I was developing all of this and communicating with the higher-ups and my peers was trying to get clear on what individualized learning actually is. There is a great deal of misnaming and misdefining when you get to using words like individualization or differentiation or personalization, and sometimes we even get into talking about modifications and IEPs or individualized education plans or things like that. And so part of our struggle was really trying to pin down what it was we were talking about when we were looking at individualized learning, because it wasn't really differentiation, although it did include some elements, and it wasn't really just personalization. We really wanted to focus on the individualization of learning. And I'll go ahead and thank you for bearing with me, because part of all of this, for it to make sense in using learning management systems that we have, we had to get very clear on what we were talking about with individualized learning. So that's why I'm also doing all of this backup work. So for us, individualized learning refers to instruction that is paced to the learning needs of different learners. The learning goals are all the same for all the students, so it doesn't vary in that way, but students can progress through material at different speeds according to their different and various learning needs. For example, this might mean that students could take a little bit longer to progress through a given topic, or even skip topics that that covers information that they already know, or go back and do repetition and do repeating on topics that they need more help on. And this gets very, very specific, and you'll see in the bottom right, it's not linked at this very moment, but I do have a copy of these slides where you can get these resources. The first resource we got that I pulled the definition for individualization comes from the Department of Education, and this resource on what the teacher who individualizes actually does comes from some additional research on differentiation, individualization, and personalization, but those can be linked later on. So the teacher who individualizes provides instruction to an individual learner, accommodates the learning needs for that learner, customizes instruction for the learner, is responsible for modifying instruction based on those needs. The objectives stay the same, but, and here comes one of the kickers, selects technology and the resources to support the learning needs of the individual learner, understands that the learner is really dependent upon them to help drive their learning, modifies data, uses data and assessments to modify and measure progress, and really focuses on assessment of learning. So what this means in the ecosphere of NCVPS is looking at all of the technologies that we had at our disposal that were contracted and required and used by NCVPS, and looking at how we could approach individualizing instruction using the technologies that we had. And in this instance, it includes Moodle, SoftChalk, and Blackboard. And I'll do a quick talk through of Moodle and SoftChalk, but I want to spend a little bit more time focusing on Blackboard, because of the three, it is the stronger in helping individualize instruction. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we had to get very clear on what we meant by individualization, and that meant lots and lots of online meetings to make sure everybody was on the same page. And for instance, we have about 80% of our courses that are taught in Moodle, and the other 20 are taught primarily in Blackboard. And in Moodle, there's a feature called the Personalized Learning Designer. Now, the way and the definition that we were using and that we were drawing on, this tool within Moodle should be actually named the Individualized Learning Designer. And so there was a bit of a naming confusion that when we use this, and when I teach this with teachers, I have to encourage them to not think of this necessarily as 100% personalized. The personalized language, just in case you're wondering, comes with a bit of baggage about students determining their own pathways, assessing their own learning, and while this, as a philosopher of education, I embrace the ideas and the ideals of personalized learning, where we're at right now at NCVPS and with online learning in K-12 education, that's highly dictated by objectives and learning standards and so on. The personalized learning designer, the naming of the personalized gives us a little bit of a headache. Yes, sorry.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to interject really quick, just for context for the folks that are on the call.
Please do, yes.
These sessions focus on Blackboard solutions. I'm not sure everyone on the call is aware that Blackboard offers Moodle through our Moodle Rooms product, and North Carolina is actually using Moodle through our Moodle Rooms solution. So I just wanted to provide that clarification for those that are on the call. Didn't want to interrupt, but just wanted to provide that context.
No, you're fine. Thank you. That's actually very helpful. I just wanted to make sure people knew the where that does come from. So thank you for sharing that. In addition to using Moodle and the Personalized Learning Designer, which is very similar, I argue, to what Blackboard has innately within its own its learning management system. In addition to that, we use to hold and house our content, and this is a fairly new technology for us, is SoftChalk. SoftChalk, for those who do not know, is a bit of a different bear than a Moodle or a Blackboard. Whereas a Moodle or a Blackboard would be more of like a learning management system, a system that's really built to facilitate courses, that has, for example, gradebook functionality, ways for students and teachers to interact. That's what would be more classified as a learning management system. But SoftChalk has kind of risen as an alternative to learning management systems in the form of a content management system, or a CMS is what people are generally call them. It doesn't give you the functionality, and it doesn't give you the interactability that a Moodle or a Blackboard would do. But it is an interesting alternative to house content like videos and images. And for example, I've listed a couple of activities that we use to help individualize instruction, such as what are known as poppers, like quiz poppers or text poppers. There, when you're interacting with content, a popper is when you roll over your mouse, something pops up and either teaches you something, shows you something, leads you to another resource, or asks you a question that can help determine which direction you go in the content. There's also quizzes. These are just the same as what we understand with Moodle and with Blackboard. And also, just in general, activities. There's a great number of activities that exist within SoftChalk that allow for expansion of learning, for considering other resources and pushing understanding, and in some cases for remediation. But primarily what I want to talk about is Blackboard and how we're using the Blackboard basic inherent functionality to individualize instruction. The two primary ones, and there are of course many others that I could focus on, but the two that I want to highlight are, and the ones that we use most at NCVPS, are adaptive release and the retention center. You'll remember from a number of slides before when I spoke about where I fit into the NCVPS spectrum, we have the two different types of courses. We have just your traditional online courses, and we also have the blended programs, the OCS and the STEM blended programs. The content is provided by NCVPS, so there are courses that are ready-made and designed according to learning standards and so on that are signed on to by a face-to-face teacher who has a face-to-face class in the district. But these are often students that we would variously title at risk or in need, who are doing a credit recovery, who are doing repeating of courses, and who need, in general, and specifically actually, more individualized attention and instruction. And that's where most of all of our courses, when it comes to this level of individualization, live in Blackboard because of the adaptive release and the retention center functionalities. Now I'm going to show and talk a little bit more about the adaptive release and retention center. I've opted, just so you know, to not do a jump out into to do any demo and just do more of a focus on talking it through right now. Just because I think for at least this session, that's where we're at, is talking it through and not necessarily doing the demos as much, because this is really trying to focus more on the theory and the pedagogy behind the individualized learning. However, I highly, highly, highly recommend getting into and working with, getting your hands dirty, as it were, with adaptive release and retention center, because they are powerful, powerful features of Blackboard. So adaptive release. It's a very simple concept that, when you really think it through, has extremely powerful ramifications for students and for their learning. In particular, given the topic of our time and our session today, individualizing learning. So adaptive release, very basic. It controls the release of content, and it's all based on rules. These rules are all set by the instructor or the teacher or the course designer. And here is just a list of some of the ways that content, the rules that you can use to set up the adaptive release. You can make content available or unavailable. You can set it to a certain date or time, to specific individual users, to a specific group if you're having group assignments or group work, to the number of attempts on an assignment, or to a score on a specific assignment, or even an overall grade that a student has in a course. Now, this sounds really simple, but when you think it through, and as the previous slide also showed, there are different levels of adaptive release. You could do a very simple adaptive release of, for example, date and time. Have your content set to release only on Mondays and Thursdays when a period begins, when students arrive. And that's a very simple one. You can also do multiple layers of adaptive release, where depending on the availability of a previous piece of content, for example, having completed a pre-assessment, that would then allow access to a certain amount of content on a certain date or time, depending upon a group membership. And then depending on the access to that content and what the score and grade is compared to their overall score, would then release an additional set of content. And so you can see you can create these chains and these pathways, I guess is a better way to say it, these pathways of accessing content that can help students master what they need to do while not having to spend time on concepts or other objectives and standards that they don't need to spend their time on. That's what the power of the adaptive release really helps for us in individualizing learning. And I keep coming back to that, to the OCS and the STEM blended programs, because that's how these courses were built. They were built from the ground up using this adaptive release feature to help students with their own pacing of content, with their own digesting of content, and to allow time for the online teacher and the face-to-face teacher to come in and additionally individualize instruction as needed. And that ties into the second key feature within Blackboard, which is the retention center. Now, I know that there's hesitation with this sort of language, which is why I'm hesitating as I'm saying it, and I'm also in here on my slide giving it in a bit of air quotes. What we would call at-risk, or students who are in trouble, or students who need to. Can you still hear me?
Welcome to the Blackboard.
I'm seeing teleconference image. Okay. Thank you, Hilda. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Ryan. Sorry, I just had a pop-up window, something about a teleconference call coming in. So I hope we're still okay.
Sorry.
The second feature is the retention.
Sorry about that. I think my session dropped. I'm not sure why it keeps having the teleconference drop back in. So I apologize. I hope it doesn't happen again.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't the one who went missing. So the second feature and especially if people are not familiar with adaptive release, they will not be as familiar with Retention Center. I have found in my experience in working with our teachers, excuse me, and that is that you create a pathway, and this is a version almost, if you can think of it, of adaptive release. Where you create a pathway using rules or triggers that are based on certain types of student participation or student engagement, and it allows for when those triggers are met, when those rules are met, you can set up automatic alerts for the instructor, automatic alerts for the student, that allow for immediate communication or immediate letting know that there needs to be a communication, and then it allows the teacher to come in and do that intervention. In the terms and in the language that we're using in ZBS, that would allow for the communication with the teacher to then create the space for an individualizing, a moment where individualizing of instruction can happen. So this could look like, in particular with your Retention Center, this could look like, okay, you have not accessed this content, and the last content that you accessed within this quiz on this particular topic, you've received a 20. Now, based on this, we have set up the rules to queue additional resources and to schedule a touch base with the online teacher. If that is not met, then you would then have a second follow-up with the online teacher and the face-to-face teacher. And then also there are other pieces of the program that I'm leaving out of, like the communication between the face-to-face teacher and the online teacher. But I want to just demonstrate and try to give the idea of how we're using the Retention Center and adaptive release in these courses. I think, yeah. Now these links are not live because when you do the translation into Blackboard Collaborate, it removes the links. But when I can share these with you, these slides with you, and I know that Katie said that she was going to share out these slides so you can get these. I included just a few of the references and the resources that we have used and that I use in particular to help familiarize myself and other teachers on adaptive release and on the Retention Center, and then also our work in individualized learning. And then that's my content right there. Now, I purposely planned, and I told Jenny and Katie that I did this and Melissa so that I would talk for about 15 or 20-ish minutes and then be quiet so we could see if there were any questions or if there's any specifics that I can talk to. I meant to do that on purpose, hopefully that we could have a lively and engaging discussion. And that was just supposed to be a teaser and an overview. So now, I'm not really sure what to do. Do I call for questions, Katie and Jenny, or do I wait and see what people are doing, or what should my next steps be?
All right, so let's open it for questions, and you can use your talk button or unmute your phone line or type in the chat, whatever you're most comfortable with. But yeah, absolutely, you can open for questions, Matthew. So which method do you prefer, Matthew? Chat or
Either chat or talk is totally up to what everyone else is comfortable with.
Okay. We've got some folks typing in the chat. I can see their little message boxes popping up, so we'll see some things coming into the chat here. Okay, so from Peggy Lawson, she's used adaptive release, but she hasn't used the retention center. She's never really experimented with it, so she'd love to see how it could be useful, if you would be willing to share some examples or show it. And then Hildy Pardo from Arlington says she thinks you mentioned earlier using announcements. And do you have examples of how such a simple tool can be used? So retention center and announcements.
Let me start. I'll start talking first about announcements, just because that's the one that's most immediately on my mind. We have part of it. It's a very simple. You would not think that this would be difficult, but it has turned out to be difficult in other learning management systems. So with at IntegrBS, the three original pillars focused on the three successful keys to teaching online: the communication, using announcements of the learning block, and using grading and feedback, using grading effectively and using feedback effectively. And one very simple way that we at IntegrBS had been individualizing instruction from the very beginning was what we called teaching through the learning block, or teaching through announcements. It depends on which learning management system you're in and which language students are familiar with, and instructors too. But one of the very simple things that we did both in Blackboard and in Moodle was created essentially it's an adaptive release or a part of the Moodle's the Personalized Learning Designer, where we force, when students first log in, every time they log in for a day, we require them to access and go to announcements. And every day, our online teachers are required to have made a specific daily post that's dated, interactive, has images, that shows their personality as a teacher, that continues the continuity of the course and the flow of the course. So if, for example, this is actually a wonderful question. Thank you so much, Hildy, for asking it. For very simply using announcements and individualizing instruction. So let's say it's Monday and I'm a math teacher, and I come in Sunday evening because I had my kids complete a quiz on a concept that we worked on last week. And I see that we're still having some struggles with something that I wasn't even prepared for, that I didn't even think would be a challenge for my students. So I will have marked and graded all of their quizzes and given them feedback in that way. But when they log in to Blackboard or to Moodle today, I could have a rule set to require them to access the announcements, and not only any announcement, but the announcement that I have posted for today, and have a specific mini lesson prepared, what we would call in teacher language a mini lesson, have that prepared and shared for students immediately when they show up. They could include like a video, a Kaltura screen recording of myself working through a couple of the quiz questions that maybe they particularly struggled with, and directing students to additional resources or to go ahead and move along in the content. So part of one of the reasons why I mentioned earlier is we've been expanding our three original pillars, the communication, announcements, and feedback, to include individualized learning. And one of the things that we were happy to learn was that a lot of the things we were doing were already meeting what we would say was individualizing instruction. And that's one example of how we would do that and how we do it through announcements. To me, and why I'm also grateful for you asking that question, is to me, who fairly fluent in learning management systems and all of the ins and outs, it seems like such a simple feature. Like you're quite right, Hildy. A simple tool. Every learning management system or every one of these tools has some form of announcements or news or whatnot. But NCBPS, and this was a decision made long before I ever arrived, made it a key feature of their pedagogy, that there was always constantly updating content right there when students landed in the course every single day, so that it was fresh, so that they knew their teachers were paying attention, and that they were there to meet their needs. So I hope that answers your question, Hildy, about the announcements. If not, I've just wasted your time for about 5 minutes as I gabbed on. I want to check and see if I answered Hildy's question, either in the chat, or she can pop in and see if that was helpful. Yeah, and see, that was one of those. Thank you, Hildy. You're exactly right. That was one of the reasons why we made the required. We set up the adaptive release so that students had to go through, had to view and read and consider the announcements before they could even access the course or their other content. And then Peggy, just right above Hildy, says, I've used adaptive release, but never retention center. I've never really experimented with it to see how it could be useful. For me, and to be honest, Peggy, most of our teachers are in the same exact place. We are quite fluent in adaptive release, and even in the advanced adaptive release, like I was saying with using multiple rules for releasing content. But the retention center was new, even for them and even for me. The way that I have approached it and think about it is, and I kind of alluded to this, is I think about and use the retention center in like the same part of my brain that thinks about adaptive release uses the retention center in a similar way, or I think about it in a similar way, but it's used primarily for remediation of instruction. It's not just for diversifying and differentiating instruction. It's really for the modifications that are needed to ensure, like for example, our credit recovery students, to ensure that they are meeting the learning objectives and the standards that are set out by the standard course of study, and that we have evidence and proof within the learning management system through the quizzes and I can't think of the other things, and the rubrics that we have to ensure that they've mastered the content. So that's how I think about it. I'm not sure if that's perfectly helpful, but I see Christine has a hand up. I think you can go.
Hi, Matthew. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Hey.
Hey, how you doing? Hello from Pennsylvania. I'm touching base. I have a couple questions, and I apologize if I missed this. You work in the public school system, or did you say a charter school?
It's a public virtual school, yeah.
Okay. So thank you. And I noticed when Hildy's question, I'm just kind of coming on to that too, as far as you were saying with the announcement. And this is something I was not aware of. You said that you can there's a way to set up your announcements that they have to go and read it, because that's one of the struggles that I have in my school, my cyber school. My students get all of their lessons from a different LMS, and they come into Blackboard for our online and live sessions and for supportive materials, although I like to use Blackboard for everything, and I put in my announcements, but they're not always looking at it. So are you saying that there actually is, and forgive me, I know that must sound like I'm really stupid as long as I've been using Blackboard. Is there a way to set that up so that way they have to see that and before they can move on and whatever is instructed within that announcement?
That is how we have it set within Blackboard. I will say that it took a little bit of rigging to make it work with the personalized Moodle designer. Not in a bad way. It was just a little bit for our teachers who were used to using Blackboard. We had to do some reteaching and some additional PL, like some just-in-time, on how to do that within Moodle. But yes, that is how we have it set up.
Okay, because I see Katie put in there, and I've used adaptive release for all of my assignments and assessments. Never used it for an announcement. I don't know why. I must brain fart, I don't know, but I've never used it, you know, like that in respect of announcement, but I guess I'll have to play with that a little bit because that is something interesting. Heidi had said, or Hildy had said, our students don't read our announcements. It's almost like it becomes old hat. They see it, their eyes just move on, and they go and click to the next part of, like, our homeroom or whatever the case may be. So it would be wonderful to listen to that.
Matthew, just to kind of clarify a couple of things that are coming up from the chat and what Carol was just saying there. Ryan King asked, you mentioned adaptive release can be set up in Moodle. Does it work in Blackboard as well? So I put clarification in. Maybe you can confirm. I said adaptive release is the Blackboard tool. The tool in Moodle is actually the personalized learning designer. So you were referring to Blackboard there. It sounds like several people from Hildy to Carol are Christine Gallagher, I'm sorry, are confused about how to use adaptive release with announcements specifically. So I don't know if you have an example where you can share your application and drill in there. But if you could clarify the Moodle versus Blackboard piece, and then maybe specifically on announcements.
Sure. I don't have an example at this very second. What I could do is get one, and then when you share out the slides, I can have that to share. Because I want to make use of our time together. I don't want to have to, it'll take me like 5 or 6 minutes just to go and find and locate it, of how we do that, because we have that set up for all of our courses. It was one of those, because we make the announcement such a priority, it was required by, for all of our courses to be set up and created that way. So I can get an example, but it will take me a little bit. But you're exactly right. What I'm saying, adaptive release, I am speaking in particular and then specifically about Blackboard, and what it is called in Moodle is the personalized learning designer. As it comes to features and what those individual tools do, adaptive release in Blackboard and personalized learning designer in Moodle, they have similar functionality but different wording. I find Blackboard to be a little bit more intuitive, if I'm honest, than I do in Moodle, but that's a personal preference, quite frankly.
You know, I just realized one other clarification I should make about that, and I represent all of Blackboard's LMS products. That's how I know this. But the PLD, or Personalized Learning Designer, for those of you who might be using Moodle outside of Blackboard, that is a Blackboard-specific Moodle Room feature. Blackboard's version of Moodle is an enhanced version. So it's not just Blackboard hosting Moodle for schools like MCVPS. It's enhanced code that lies on top of Moodle. So if you're experiencing Moodle somewhere else and you can't find the PLD, that's because that's the Moodle Room enhanced version of Moodle from Blackboard, and we can get you more information on that. But just FYI, the PLD is a Blackboard-specific Moodle feature. So.
Thank you. You see, so to everybody who's in the room with us, you can see how this gets kind of confusing, especially with the different naming and the wording that we're using. But you're exactly right. Now, I may have lost track of where I was in questions.
It just looks like a lot of people are interested to learn more about how you're using adaptive release in combination with announcements. We're getting it from Hildy and Ryan and Christine. So I think that would be, great in the follow-up. Maybe you could do a short jing, or if you had a little PDF we wanted to.
I was going to say, is it possible that I could record a little quick screencast that could be shared with everybody?
Yes, we'll be embedding the link.
Okay, because that would be actually.
Yeah, we're going to be embedding the link to the recording, and we'll attach the PDF, but we can embed another link to a little screencast as well.
Oh, that's perfect. I'll actually ask the room, would you like to see it in both Blackboard with the adaptive release and in our Moodle rooms with the PLD, the Personalized Learning Designer? I can do both. If I do a follow-up video, I could do both or just one or the other.
It seems like knowing the customers that are on, most of them are Blackboard users that have been asking that question. So I think it's specifically adaptive release with the announcements in Blackboard Learn. But please,
absolutely.
Please
all right.
Up in the chat if I'm wrong. Okay.
Got it. All right, so I'm adding it to my to-do list for later this afternoon. Remember, here on the West Coast, it's still lunchtime, so I've got some time this afternoon to get it pulled together. I see that wink, wink, Hildy.
Well, it sounds like he's doing.
Does anybody else have any other questions or anything that I can address or speak to?
Yeah, what other questions do we have out there? We'll be sure to pass feedback to PD. It does sound like you're doing this with Learn Functionalities out today. Is that right, Matthew?
Say again?
It does sound like you are doing this with Blackboard Learn Functionality today, correct?
Correct.
Great. We'll keep walking for more questions to come in. We can move forward to not to stop questions here, but we haven't had any questions in a few minutes here. If we want, we can do the couple closing slides and keep monitoring the chat to see if we have additional questions as they come in. And that way, if there aren't any additional questions, we can give folks, 5 or 6 minutes back in their day. So I'll go ahead and advance here. Just a reminder that Matthew's session will be added to the BB K-12 Live app. So be sure to download it if you haven't already. And then just lastly, I'm going to get this right this time. On Monday, please join us again at 3:30 Eastern Time. I was right, but it's Tashawn and Carrie from Metro Nashville Public Schools. But the name of their session is actually Moving a School to Blended, Factors that Contribute to Success, which I stated incorrectly at the beginning of the session. So it's a blended learning session and factors that contribute to blended learning success. So connections to part of Matthew's session today, the courses that are being developed for blended. Matthew, thank you for a great session today. And again, we'll watch more questions that come in if there are any. But thank you all for joining us today. And Matthew, thank you for sharing your expertise and time with us. Thanks everyone for joining.
This call is no longer being recorded.